Welcome to our bi-weekly chat. This is Gerald, and I'm glad that you're with us today. This is Friday, October the 7th, 2016. My Lord, the year is fleeting away. Before you know it, it's going to be 2017. You know, in a few weeks, or actually a few days, and about a month now, we're going to be going into the election for President of the United States. I understand that on Saturday they're going to be holding the final debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. But getting off of that subject for the time being, hello, Teresa. My wife is joining us, as well as Paul Dillett. I'm glad to see you, brother. We're glad to have you with us on the show today. We're going to be discussing a very serious topic. But before we do that, I want to remind you of the wonderful time my wife and I and the rest of the family had together. Hi, Chris. Chris Jr. is with us. That we had yesterday with my mother. It was her 87th birthday, and we celebrated at the Cheesecake Factory here in Philadelphia. And we had a glorious time with her and with the other members of my family. My wife was there, my brother, my sister-in-law, and my nephews were all there to celebrate our mother's birthday. Pastor Tasha Coleman's with us. God bless you. We had a wonderful time with her. I tell you the truth, she means the world to me. She has all my life, and she has always been there with me through my struggles, through my highs and my lows. She's been right there, and she still remains there as my bulwark, even today in the year 2016. We're glad to have you with us today. We're going to deal with a topic because, you know, today in this society, there's so much emphasis on political correctness. Political correctness. You can't say much about folk today. I tell you the truth, we live in a world where everyone is walking on pins and needles, and we're very conscious of what we say and how we say it, and you can lose your job today. You can even lose the opportunity to become president of the United States if you cross over that realm of reasonability and that realm of political correctness. You have to be careful what you say today. You have to be very careful. Even we as Christians have to be careful what we say and how we say it. Say someone will accuse us of some horrendous crime or horrendous attitude towards people. And we're very sensitive about that. We have young black men and women today, and those that support them and those that endorse them, that talk about Black Lives Matter. We have folk that are in the gay community, and they now say that we're out of the closet onto the streets. They're taking a stand. Muslims and indigenous Americans, we know as Native Americans, Indians, if you will, they're taking a stand. Latinos are taking a stand against injustice, against people that are rising up and saying some horrific things about them as a people, threatening them with deportation, threatening them with not being able to come to this country for refuge and for a sense of purpose and a sense of freedom. But they're not taking it anymore. They refuse to sit back and let life dictate and racist and bigoted people dictate their destiny. They refuse to allow people to dictate what they're going to be and where they're going to go in their lives. They refuse to do it anymore. But one group still remains on the fringes. One group still remains marginalized, if you will. One group still is in the back seat of the bus, if they can get on the bus at all. And that group is people with disabilities. Now, the irony of the whole thing is this, that there are 60 million people with some sort of disability, whether it be physical, developmental, or mental disability. Good afternoon, Brother Eric. Praise the Lord to you too, my brother. there are more people that are disabled than any other minority group. The census says that there are 42,000 African Americans in the United States. There are 42 million rather. I believe I said that. African Americans. There are 50 million Latin Americans here in this country. There are 17 million Asian Americans in this country and 10 million Native Americans here in the United States. So we are by far the largest minority group. There are people that are disabled that are visibly disabled. You can see their disability. And there are many millions that are invisibly disabled with diabetes, epilepsy, multiple sclerosis, other disabilities, lupus. My wife and I were talking about it today. We've mentioned it here on the program before. How she faces challenges every day. She called me today about having extreme headaches. She gets momentary, temporary blindness from time to time. But she goes out and she does what she has to do. People don't know it. People don't know her struggles. Maybe you have a condition, a prognosis, a diagnosis that's not visible to the naked eye. And by what people can see about you, there's nothing wrong with you. But you know you have to watch your diet. Watch how much you do. Maybe take certain medications that make it seem as though, mask, if you will, the struggles that you go through. So there are 60 million people. Some are depressed, and it's called manic depression. You get so depressed that you become suicidal. And I know many people that I even know have had bouts of that, have had to struggle with wanting even sometimes to kill themselves, whether life was even worth living. These are conditions that are real, serious. But still we have this problem in this nation of marginalizing, excluding, if you will, not including people with disabilities. I think a large part of that is due to the definition that Merriam-Webster penned in his dictionary concerning disability. He says a disability is being limited, disadvantaged, disqualified from doing anything. Now keep in mind, my brother was talking about what dictionary was it, and I told him the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and he knew about Merriam-Webster dictionary. It's known to be the most used dictionary, the most trusted dictionary, and the most respected dictionary of all the dictionaries and even all reference books out there. So when Merriam-Webster, which is called the collegiate dictionary, most colleges use it, most college students use it, when they refer to people with disability as being limited, disadvantaged, and disqualified from doing anything, that sets up a mindset in non-disabled people's mind as well as disabled people's mind. Hello, Brother Steve. We begin to think of ourselves, and who are disabled, we begin to think of ourselves in light of the definition. And those in the able-bodied world begin to think of us in light of that definition as well. Oh, he's limited. He can only do but so much. Some go a little further, said he's disadvantaged. He's working with a handicap right off the bat. Anybody knows anything about golf or bowling, you know sometimes you play a game with a handicap because you're not quite as good as the person you're playing against. And some go as far as saying, we're not qualified to do anything. When I think about employing someone, I'm thinking about somebody other than. Good afternoon, Sister Beverly. I'm thinking about someone other than that person in the wheelchair, that person that wears a hearing aid, that person that is led by a CNI dog. I'm thinking about somebody else. I'm not thinking about that guy over there with Down syndrome or someone who's been diagnosed with schizophrenia or Tourette syndrome or massive or manic depression or epilepsy. I'm not thinking about them. In fact, if you say it on your application, you may automatically be scratched off as being a possible candidate for the job. People with disabilities are the most impoverished, the most mistreated, and abused people of all. The 2000, I want to read this statistic to you because it's so important, and I want to read it just as it is. And I'm going to read it to you very quickly. But it says that in the 2017, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Department of Labor says that 17% of people with disabilities were employed compared to 65% of those without disabilities. Wow. 17%. But some we know cannot work. The disability disqualifies them from working. Good afternoon, Rodney. But there are many people with disabilities, in particular those with invisible disabilities, that aren't confined to the bed or confined to whatever confinement they may have, the hospital or rehab center or convalescent home, whatever the case may be. There are millions of people out there that are qualified and anxious to find employment. Now, in 1990, then Daddy Bush, better known as President George Herbert Walker Bush, signed into law the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. And the ADA was created to even out the playing field in jobs and transportation and commercial services and governmental services, that it evened out the playing field so there would be no more discrimination and bias as it relates to people with disabilities. But sadly, in many instances, it has failed. It has failed. People with disabilities are not hired. And many times they're the first hired on a job. They look past the ability and can't get their eyes off of the disability enough to see the potential in that individual. Statistics will tell you that people with disabilities are the most faithful workers that you may have. They'll come to work on time, they'll do whatever is asked of them, and they'll stay late even after hours. Because they appreciate the fact that they've been given the opportunity. It's a sad thing that you have to work overtime and extra hard above everybody else in order to get the same benefits of other people, but that's the way it is. Sad. Where's the even playing field? Is there an even playing field? Do disabled lives matter at all? Do they matter at all? Personally, I know that there's challenges. A couple of days ago, my wife was trying to get on a bus, and she can't run anymore. She's has a condition that will not let her run, plus she's 52 years old. I'm sorry to say it, dear, but I got to tell the truth. But her lupus would not allow her to run. She had a hip surgery last year, and so she could not run, but there was a crossing guard who was telling the bus driver, she was getting ready to go off to do something with a friend of hers, and She signaled the bus driver to stop. There was someone getting ready to come to the bus, to get on the bus. And the bus driver looked at the woman who was waving, the crossing guard, who we know very well, looked at my wife, laughed, literally laughed at her, and went on by. Yesterday, I was going to my mother's birthday celebration. My daughter was there with me. She didn't go to the celebration. There's my nephew, Jamil. How you doing, Jamil? And as the bus came to the stop, I noticed that he wasn't pulling up near the curb, that he stayed out in the street. And I told my daughter, I said, why can't he pull up near so I can get on easier? That incline getting on the street can be kind of treacherous. So my daughter went to the bus and she knocked on the door and he opened the door and he had the transfer in his hand. This is a SEPTA bus driver. I'm going to say what it is. We're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. SEPTA is our public transportation. And he told her that there were too many people on with walkers that I couldn't get on the bus. She looked in the bus and saw there was plenty of room. The bus really was virtually empty. I saw after the bus pulled off, I saw many seats in the back that were empty, had no one in them. But he decided that he didn't want the bother of putting me on the bus. He sped on off. My daughter did get the number of the bus and got the bus driver's name. She asked for all of that. Coming back home, the bus driver then reminded me of, it was the same bus driver who had a couple of weeks ago taken me to another appointment, and she didn't want me to get on the bus at all. In fact, she said when I got on the bus, because she couldn't help but get me on the bus, when I got on the bus, she said, oh, people's feet are in the way. You may not get on this bus. I said, and I turned to the women who were older women, older than I was, and asked them would they move just a bit so that I can maneuver and get into that place that was designated for people in wheelchairs and other seniors and other people with disabilities. They not only moved, they actually got up and gave me all the room I needed to swing in. Now, the ADA says this was a discriminatory action. Now, you say, well, Red, why, Gerald, why don't you call SEPTA? Why don't you write SEPTA? Why don't you? I've done this over and over again to no avail. I belong to a group, a disability advocacy group, and they said they ain't going to listen to you. And we've had complaints over complaints, and they just take the information in, and nothing goes any further than they're receiving the information. On the job, I've been relieved of my job because no one wanted to do this for me, and they don't make any accommodations for me. And most of the jobs I worked for, except for one or two, were run by Christians. And two were run by actually a church. The church I belong to, both of them. One said you have an option. Either you can stay in the church that you are now the pastor of, who cannot afford to give you health insurance to help you with your problem that you had with your knee that had arisen at this time, or you can retire. That's the only option you have, because you don't fit the image of a first-class pastor. I pastored 6 churches over the many years, 20 years of my pastoring. From Delaware to Pennsylvania, I've pastored them all. I've pastored most churches I pastored. They were churches that were splintered and were folding up, and the members weren't coming out. And I rebuilt them and got them going, and they, But you don't fit the image of a first-class pastor. Over and over again in my quest to become a pastor, this was always an issue. One of my pastors in my home church said, because you can't carry the communion tray right for communion, that you can't be an elder of the church. If you are, you have to be a local elder, only confined to your local church. You can never be a pastor of another church. When I was on the way to be getting my first church, one of the leading elders of that denomination, saw me walk up to greet him and to meet him to discuss the appointment. And he looked at me, shook his head, and said, what's wrong with you? You had a stroke or something? Naturally, that killed any hopes of that appointment. That would have been in Bermuda. So time and time again, I've had to face this kind of discrimination. But we have to do something about this. And as I looked at the history of the civil rights movement, I noticed two things about it. The first thing they did, and I'm going to tell those who have disabilities or anyone who has an issue of being marginalized in this society, whether it's because of economics, whatever the case may be, whatever your issue may be, let me tell you two things that I learned from the civil rights movement, and I'm a history scholar. In fact, I was a history teacher. My minor was Black history at Temple University. And just my reading over the years, I've discovered two things. I'll be 65 in November, so certainly I've lived through some of this. Two things I learned, and one is you have to get the media's attention. Now, we live in a society now where cell phones are used for everything. We take all kinds of pictures of everything. Something nonsensical stuff that really has no import or impact on anybody, not even yourself, but you want to take a picture of it. We got games on the phones. We got all kinds of stuff on the phone. Phone can do anything. I'm on my phone right now recording this broadcast. When I go on to YouTube recording the broadcast there, I'm on this phone. But I'm here to tell you, when you see discrimination, I'm going to tell you, even this thing with Eric Gardner and Tavon Martin and all the rest of them, it became known the more by people putting it on the cell phones. It got out there. People started noticing it. We don't have to wait for ABC, NBC, and CBS or any other news station, CNN, MNBC, and all the rest of them. Don't have to worry with waiting on them. We can videotape it ourselves, send it into one of those stations, even your local station. That's the first thing. We got to get it out there. And anybody can do it. I mean, don't take a village to do that. If something's happening to you, from now on, it just came to me about that, in terms of personalizing it. If I get on a bus, if I find discrimination somewhere that's directed towards me as a person with disability, or me as a person, as an African-American person, whatever the case may be, I'm going to video it. I'm going to put it right on my cell phone. I'm going to put it right on my cell phone. Maybe put it on YouTube where it may go viral and other people will see it and other people will talk about it. Start putting it on there, and not for nonsensical stuff. And I don't mean put on there if you see somebody beating up somebody and all that, like these girls beating up each other, these boys beating up each other, and just putting it in there for your own entertainment. I mean, act on it. Do something about it. Positive. That's the first thing. That's something you can do, I can do, we can do. And the second thing is that I learned from the civil rights movement, we have to be united. When the civil rights movement began, there was a bourgeoisie class that was against those who endorsed agriculture. Agricultural classes and other things, the farming. Oh no, we were slaves too long. We shouldn't be farming anymore. We should be part of the bourgeoisie. The mucks, the people in the know and the people with power. We need everybody. In the disability community, we have people that endorse and support people that have physical disabilities. We have others that support developmental disabilities. We have others that support mental disabilities, and they support them exclusively. And even with the physical disabilities, there's splinters. United Cerebral Palsy, there's a group for the multiple sclerosis, there's a group for lupus, there's a group for this, there's a group for that. Yes, we have distinct disabilities and different degrees of disability, from mild to moderate to severe, invisible and invisible disabilities. All of that. Some can walk, some can't, some can hear, some can't. Some are short in stature, some are tall, extremely tall. But there's one thing that we have that society recognizes more than we do. They look at us as being disabled. They make no distinctions. If I go into a restaurant, sometimes they treat me as though I have a developmental challenge as well as a physical one, the way they treat me. Talking to somebody who's with me as if I can't speak for myself. Asking them questions about me as if I can't answer those questions myself. I've seen people who are blind, and people will yell at them and they'll tell them, I'm not deaf, I'm blind. And vice versa. People who are deaf, people will treat them in certain ways. They look at us and put us in the same boat. We're the only ones that want to travel in the dinkies and the little tugboats around the way. They put us in the ocean liners and put us all in that one boat. And they treat us all the same. We have to stop that and put ourselves as one. I remember there used to be an issue years ago when I was growing up about the color of your skin. If you were light skinned or whether you were dark skinned, and people would be partial either way. If you were light, you couldn't interact with the darker black person and vice versa. You didn't want to be a part of each other's everyday life, and you were jealous of one another and all of that foolishness. And yet the larger society looked at us all as being black. We were all the N-word. I remember one time, Senator Edward Brooke from Massachusetts went down into the South. I believe it was Alabama. There was a trial going on. And he went down there because the person on trial was a constituent of Massachusetts. That's where he came from, but he got in trouble down south. And he went there, with his entourage. He was a senator, United States senator, not a state senator, a United States senator. First black United States senator in modern times. Reconstruction had a few senators and congressmen, but in modern times, he was the first black senator. Very fair of face, very light-skinned black man. In fact, he was a distant cousin of my great aunt-in-law. And so he went down there to witness this trial and to make sure that his constituent was tried fairly and justly and the rest. As soon as he walked in, the sheriff of the town where the trial was, actually of the county that the trial was being held, stopped him and directed him to go up into the balcony where all the N-words go. And Senator Brooke told him exactly who he was. I'm a United States Senator from Massachusetts. I'm here to make sure that my fellow citizen of Massachusetts is treated fairly in your judicial system. He said, I don't care who you are. Down here, you are what we say you are. And down here, boy, you are in. You can go back home and be a senator. You can go back home and sit in the congressional halls. You can go back home and hobnob with the president. But down here, boy, you ain't nothing but an end. Now, either you get up in the balcony or you take the first train back home where you belong. Doesn't matter. Whether you walk with a cane, doesn't matter. Whether you have to travel in a wheelchair, it doesn't matter. Whether your skin breaks out because of lupus, it doesn't matter. If you have lesions because you have HIV and or AIDS, it doesn't matter. Whether you're deaf, whether you're blind, whether you're short of stature, Whether you have cancer that's eating away at your body, whether you have diabetes and you've lost a leg or lost a limb or lost a toe or lost an arm because of it, gone blind because of it, it doesn't matter. You're disabled, and that's all that counts. They see us as one. And until we begin to see ourselves as one, nothing will ever really change for us. We will always be on the outside looking in. We will always be one of the largest minorities with the least amount of power, the least amount of representation, the least amount of inclusion. A few years ago, I went to a church in this area where I live in Philadelphia. And the first time I went, everything was fine. The second time I went, I was met at the door before I got into the sanctuary, actually. And the individual, I believe it was the usher, came to me. I had my clergy on and everything. Had my clergy shirt and all of that. And I was going to visit, to see about the church. It was near me, not too far from me. I didn't need to get on a bus or anything. It was accessible in terms of being able to get in the building. But the attitude. He said, well, we have our maximum of people in wheelchairs. We have a maximum of 4. Any more than 4, you got to go back. So try again. And he told me to try again. And I would advise you to get here a little earlier so you can get your place in the sanctuary. Now, let me tell you something. This was not a storefront church. This was not a small building. This was a huge sanctuary that I know could hold more than 4 wheelchairs. But you know what I did? I didn't let it die. That's been a while ago, but I didn't let it die. I kept on in my crawl. I wanted to make sure that those in authority knew what was going on. So I wrote a letter to the pastor and the officers of that church. And one of the deacons called me today and said he apologized for the treatment, the treatment that was offered unto me, and he apologized for that. He said that he's going to bring it to the usher board meeting and to the ushers and tell them this is not what our policy is. This is not how we treat fellow Christians, certainly fellow Christians. And if we treat a Christian like that, how do we treat those who are not Christians, we're trying to win them to Christ? If they can't, you mean a person who is not saved and came into the church in a wheelchair, we would tell them to go back and come another day? So I went back a few times. One time with my wife and one time with one of my aides, and I went back. Those 2 times, and I told the deacon that there was only 2 wheelchairs beside myself. That made 3. So I was able to go in and worship in the worship experience. It was a wonderful worship experience, but you got to get into the sanctuary before you can experience it. You have to do something. You can't be complacent. I don't care what your condition is. I don't care what your situation is. You cannot be complacent. It's the wheel that squeaks that gets the oil. That means you got to speak up. Got to take those cell phones. Got to write letters. Your congressmen, your senators, the pastor of the church, the manager of the building. We're in a situation now that I can't even get inside my building once I get out of it because the key, the sensor key doesn't work. At least mine doesn't. Some do, some don't. But I'm one of the people that can't go into the front door and climb the stairs. There's another lady here who also is an amputee, and she can't go into the front door and come into her own apartment. Neither can I. Unless somebody happens to be outside, or unless I'm going with somebody who can go around to the front, open up the door, climb up the stairs, open up the door, and let me in through the ramp, I can't get in. Now, I can kind of hold out for a minute when it's nice and warm, but winter is coming soon. And I shouldn't have to not go outside and do what I got to do because it's a hit and miss whether I can get back inside the building. Something has to be done. We've already written to them that we're going to take another action. And we'll send it to those who need to know. We are American citizens, every one of us, all 320 million people. Whether you're disabled, whether you're black, whether you're poor, whether you're rich, I don't care who you are, what economic spectrum you fall on. It doesn't matter. Whether you're Catholic, whether you're Jewish, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Protestant, whether you're Buddhist or Hindu, it doesn't matter. Latino, Asian, woman, man, doesn't matter. We all are equal under the law. And more importantly, we all are equal in God's sight. Well, dear hearts, we're glad that you stopped by today, and we hope that you receive something that will be a blessing to you. If you know someone who's disabled, if you know that you are disabled yourself, and no one knows your condition, but you know it, and you feel that there's been an injustice done to you, I invite you to do something about it. Stand with others who are experiencing the same thing you're experiencing. Let your voice and their voice unite as one and get justice done. Have a wonderful weekend and see you on Monday, the same time. God bless you. Love you all. Love you in particular, Teresa. You know that. Talk to you soon.